Welcome to the Blockchain All-Star Series. I'm your host, Layla Gulen. Blockchain and distributed ledger technology are at the forefront of the 3.0 era, where the technology enables trusted and transparent sharing of data and digital assets. And though the technology is still in its early stages, who makes up the constellation of innovators guiding us through the digital revolution powered by blockchain? We'd like to welcome Lucy Gazmararian. Lucy is the founder and managing partner of TokenBayCapital, an early-stage venture fund based in Hong Kong. She is also a board member of the Fintech Association of Hong Kong and former blockchain committee co-chair and founder of Women in Crypto. Thank you so much for being here, Lucy.
Great. Such a pleasure. Thank you, Layla.
Well, congratulations on making Fintech Magazine's top 100 women in fintech and number 22 in that top 100. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's incredible. And, before we dive into your career and what led you to this place and all the accolades that come along with it, what is the latest happenings in the crypto and blockchain industry right now?
Gosh, I mean, I think what sums it up is that even people very deeply involved in the space can barely keep up with all the developments. I think, there was a period of time when we had the bear market at the end of the ICO craze in 2017. And a lot of companies, were actually relieved because they could actually breathe, get their ducks in a row and start building. And then obviously, as soon as the price of Bitcoin and other key benchmarks or bellwethers for the space, if you like, start taking off, it's a flurry of interest and bringing more people into the ecosystem. And so it gets very busy. And, we've seen many different trends emerge just in the last 18 months. We saw DeFi take off. We saw NFTs take off. There's an awful lot of M&A activity going on in the space. And, I think there's a broader acceptance that this is the future. And I think it's now fully in mainstream consciousness. And that's really recent in the last 18 months or so.
And what would you say to people who have not quite caught on just yet? Because you say that crypto, blockchain, it's gaining traction. There are still some of those outliers who are not quite convinced. So what would you say to that? And how long do you think it would take for that group, that camp, to kind of get on board?
I think crypto requires a mindset shift. And I think that's why people get stuck when they read the headlines, because actually, the term that we sort of throw around in the crypto world is do your own research. But there is a path that you need to go down and really read up about what this new technology does. What is the power and the promise of this technology? Because it is a different way of thinking about things. That's why there's so much hype and excitement about it, because actually it is a paradigm shift. And so you can't just look on CNBC and see the price of Bitcoin that is linked to apparently nothing. You can't then appreciate what that signals, actually what's really going on underneath that, because the story is far broader than just Bitcoin. And so for anyone that is looking to get into the space, the main thing I say is, I would love to impart all the knowledge that I've developed in the space over the last 4 or 5 years, but actually you need to apply yourself in some way. And the good news is it's never been easier to do that. There are many tools. A lot of us in the space really pride ourselves on communicating and bridging that gap and helping to bring others up the learning curve. But it does require a little bit of application and openness to a different way of thinking about things.
So where do you see the industry headed, say, in the next 12 months?
Next 12 months, I think it's still going to be very much a building phase. But I think with the listing of Coinbase, we're now seeing actually these crypto businesses, native crypto businesses, moving on to national stock exchanges. So it's really, there was a reason why that was so important. We're going through, I want to say there's one watershed moment, but actually there are many watershed moments that are really in quick succession. And that's because this is just really snowballing now. It started, I would say, with PayPal introducing Bitcoin and crypto to all of its customers in the US. But there have been so many announcements since then. I mean, the types of companies that are buying Bitcoin, it's going onto NASDAQ listed balance sheets, and a number of mainstream businesses are incorporating crypto, as well as the fintechs and virtual banks, for example. So I think the next 12 months is this snowball effect is going to continue. I don't see as deep a bear market as the one we experienced in 2017, 2018 coming back again. I think we've passed the point of no return. And so I think there's going to be a huge acceleration going forwards, and the next 12 months is going to demonstrate that.
And with more than 6,000 cryptocurrencies out there, what happens to them? I mean, Bitcoin being the number one, but what happens to all the other smaller ones?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I mean, I think this is where people need to sort of apply themselves to this concept of a token and what value it represents. You could look at it and say it's worthless, but the participants that ecosystem that are part of the ecosystem of which that token is the sort of the instrument that holds value of that group of participants and that network. As long as that network continues and collectively they all agree that whatever it is that's powering that token is of value, then it holds value for that ecosystem of users. So that is really the landscape, if you like, of crypto, that people can group together on the internet, find like-minded people, and a token is what binds them together. So actually, all of these tokens, it's all representing different communities, different business models that are operating on this new blockchain infrastructure. And let's see what happens. Are they going to merge? Are some of them going to go to zero? Probably, but that's driven more by what the participants want, rather than anyone coming from the outside saying that token should go to zero. So again, this idea of tokens and ecosystems is a new one, but it's powerful, and I would say it's here to stay.
It's fascinating. Let's take a few steps back. You studied modern history in college at university. So tell us a little bit more about what led you to that course of study, and then we'll get into how that evolved into the banking industry.
Yes. So I've always been a passionate historian, and actually I love that I'm got a front row seat as history is currently being made right now. I mean, that's really where I am most grateful. I feel this is truly transformational for the world. And yes, so I've always loved history. I studied history at Oxford. I actually couldn't have done anything more in contrast to my life now. I actually studied, it was called modern history, but I happened to have a professor that wanted me to study the Christianization of the Roman Empire. So I set about studying the birth of all religions and really the power struggles of that time. I did a special paper in St. Augustine, City of God, and did the original text, read the original text in Latin and took a paper in Latin. So, it's quite extraordinary going from those days at Oxford to where I am today. But actually, that there is an overlap. It's changing times.
Yeah, absolutely. That is absolutely true. So curious if you ever find a correlation between the two. Do you find a correlation between history and banking?
Well, banking was one step to getting to crypto. I mean, I feel like I've truly seen the light now with this technology. Yeah. But banking was... I wouldn't say my banking experience really was historical. Well, I'll tell you what was historical: living through the GFC, the great financial crisis, and thinking that the whole financial markets infrastructure was going to melt down overnight. That was a very strong historical moment. And I remember it very clearly. I was an analyst at Goldman in London. And there was just silence. It was really as if all these financial institutions were suddenly going to just crumble. And we forget that was such an unbelievable time, but it's incredible. We move on. And I think in many respects, I would draw parallels with the great financial crisis and the technology that we're seeing emerge today, that's blockchain enabled, which is way more secure, efficient, auditable, everything. All the problems that we had that led to the GFC, we are solving for with the technology today. So I would say, a lot of parallels there. And, it's been repeated many times, but obviously the Bitcoin white paper referenced the great financial crisis. And, here is a better way of potentially doing things. And my goodness, hasn't that proved to be true? It's amazing times that we're living through.
It's true. And for it to have changed in such a short amount of time. I mean, we see the evolution of technology, and just 20 years ago, the internet wasn't what it is today. Devices aren't what they are today. So it just seems like things are changing, moving at the speed of light. I'm also curious how you took your banking and asset management experience and translated that into fintech. So how did you make that transition? When did you make that transition?
So it was a very calculated move. I'd had a brilliant career in finance, and I'm forever grateful for that. It was a great time both in London and Singapore, but it got to the point where I saw there were failings in these banks. I could see the innovation happening sort of in the far distance. They keep you so busy; it's very hard to actually engage with the new trends. But I could tell that the business model was broken. And the way that people were trying to make money and bringing customers and bankers and products together was broken. It wasn't, you're not selling something that clients actually want. And, the pie was very much shrinking, which I think brings out the worst in human nature. And I think that decreasing pie phenomenon, which is what I would call it, really set in after the great financial crisis. And to this day, I don't think it's fully recovered from that. So I knew there was technology out there. I wanted to get involved with it. I went seeking for my next move. I knew I was going to do a career pivot, and I'm very passionate about career pivots and people embracing those and seeing that as a really strong moment. And I got myself to Davos in 2018, and that was with Oxford. And so I was networking around the mountains looking for my next thing, thinking it was going to be fintech. But of course, it was the height of the ICO boom. So everyone was talking about token projects and decentralized networks and the downfall of governments and nation states, which as an outsider that had barely heard of Bitcoin, that was really quite an impactful moment. And I remember it very, very clearly. And I sat there and I looked at these panels. I watched how smart the people were and how eloquent and articulate they were. And I said, this is what I want to dedicate the next phase of my career to. And then, as it so happens, chain of events, I met someone in Davos that was hiring for a crypto team in Hong Kong. And 2 weeks later, I found myself immersed in crypto and have never looked back.
That's amazing. For a lot of people, I think, to try to embrace something that is new, it's a little frightening because it's unproven. So did you ever have any reservations? I mean, it sounds like you really kind of dove in head first and really dedicated yourself to the change. Did you have any reservations at all, thinking that, to veer away from tradition might be a risky move?
Actually, I say no, but there was a moment where, in terms of understanding something new, I thrive on that. So I love to give myself challenges. So that was fantastic. But there was a moment, I came from a very corporate background, a very smart, ultra high net worth clients. I would fly around Asia talking about the market, selling, traditional stocks and bonds and giving macro updates. And it was very formal, very suits. I remember my first few meetings at PwC because all these token projects were coming to PwC because they wanted to use the logo on their website to be able to raise 30 million in a week, right, on these token projects, which as far as I could see were just nothing. And I remember sitting in some meetings with these kind of gamers that had flown in from Cyprus in shorts and flip-flops. Sitting there in this PwC meeting room, and I'm sort of sitting there and they're like, yeah, talking away. And I just remember this sort of out-of-body experience going, Lucy, I think you have made an epic career fail. It is. And it's really funny that moment happened, because the bridge was so enormous at that point through the old world and the new world. It was very few old world players were willing to even engage with this sector and this new technology. Because in many respects, some of its early days, was sort of tainted by not such great actors. But gosh, fast forward no time, and we want those meetings, and that's totally fine to rock up in a hoodie, and suddenly the old world, now Goldman Sachs, I think, within that time frame, abolish suits, and you could have like casual dressing. So it's incredible how it's sort of coming together so much more. But there was a few moments where I thought not the best.
And now we embrace the flip-flops, and
now we all work from home in our pajamas. So
exactly. Do we even own pants anymore? This is true. You sound like very much a trailblazer in your own right, that you really have kind of set your own path. Would you say, though, that you had any mentors along the way, anyone that inspired you, either in the traditional banking sector or in that transition / new venture, as it were, in fintech?
I've always embraced mentors. I think that the company that first made me realize that was a term, and actually something that was very important, was Goldman Sachs. They're very, very good at mentors and having that process in place, and understanding that you need people to speak to, and you need people to help bring you up, and people then help in return, and it's a sort of virtuous circle. So because that was instilled in me from quite a young age, I've always looked for mentors and like to be a mentor myself. I really believe in that. So I wouldn't put it down to any single person, but I have significant people in my life, both from traditional finance and from the crypto world, that I will very much speak to and confide in and discuss things with. And I feel lucky, actually, to have a lot of really fantastic people helping to guide the way. And it's a two-way street. You bring something to the table as well, right? You bring new perspectives. So it's a structure I really believe in.
That's wonderful. Well, and I want to get to the business that you started back in March, but since we're on the topic of mentorship, you started Women in Crypto in 2019. Tell us more about this organization.
So Women in Crypto, it started out as bringing together a group of women that are working in these crypto businesses across Asia, bring them together because, quite frankly, why shouldn't we have drinks every quarter and have our own network? At the end of the day, let's not overcomplicate things. Crypto is about ecosystems, both online and offline, and it's another group, and it's another way to connect and network with people. But what I really found is that a lot of the crypto businesses, particularly in the early days, panicked to hire at least one woman. So, you'd have these very sort of fast-paced, cutting edge crypto companies, and then one lone woman, right? Which I don't believe is the best model. I think one woman on her own is maybe a little bit intimidating. Sometimes they could be a younger hire, and just it's all too much, right? Crypto is a challenging industry anyway to keep on top of, to understand. You have to be pretty resilient, actually. And so it was just another opportunity for women to come together and be able to share experiences, and also see what's happening at the other crypto businesses, and just create that kind of network. So that's really how it started. But now it's evolving into something more, because I think there is a need for more women to be part of this crypto movement. It's really changing not just our financial lives, but our social lives as well, and really all aspects of our lives. And it's once in a lifetime opportunity to be involved in this. So, I have been very busy with setting up TokenBayCapital, but I am speaking to some of the other big crypto businesses that are looking to attract female users, right, to their platforms, and really sort of doing some educational events, doing some outreach to show that actually there's plenty of women in the space, and it's great, and come ask questions and join the movement.
So if we could quantify it, what is the climate like right now for women in crypto?
I think there's still work to be done. I personally have never experienced, so, I always talk to this topic as someone that's had many positive experiences. I've never, even in traditional finance, right, that was also, because we had that sort of imbalance even in traditional financial services, and we're just seeing that sort of continue into crypto. But I personally have never had bad experiences. I've had great supporters and a great environment. That being said, I recognize not everybody is that lucky, and different characters may have different experiences, right, in these different worlds. So I would say that, I think it's still hard. People reach out to me, do you know anyone that can be a female speaker on this panel? But I would say there's a concerted effort to get women into the limelight. So I want to be quite positive about it. It's, even though there is an imbalance still, I think people are really open to making the change and trying to make it as equal as possible. And the more female women we have that are inspirational, because ultimately you need to look up, right, and see someone doing it to feel like you belong. And if it's only very sort of alpha males wearing hoodies, maybe women just don't feel like they belong. Whereas this is a technology for the whole world. Everybody belongs. Absolutely everybody. This is the whole point of it. And so I think there's work to be done, but it will be fixed. I'm optimistic.
The same thing could be said for Silicon Valley. So getting women in tech and period, and getting young girls into STEM studies and them transitioning off to tech jobs, that's still kind of a slow go even today. But what about minorities? If we're talking, say, Silicon Valley, there are plenty of minorities if we're talking about a US-based operation working in tech. But what about in cryptocurrency?
I can't really talk to, the interesting thing about crypto is that everyone's kind of on their own at home on their computer. Actually it's quite an anonymous movement. You can't physically see it. It's not like walking into a bank where you can physically see what the balance is of gender and diversity and minorities. It's actually, very much online and behind your computer. So, hey, maybe it's really way more diverse than we could ever imagine. And it's actually very, very inclusive, because that is the whole power of this technology, that all you require is your internet connection, your application to be involved. And before you know it, you're in communities and networks and contributing to DeFi, NFTs, whatever it is that floats your boat, with no barriers to entry, with no interview process, with someone sitting there ticking things off. So actually it's an incredible movement where I don't think anyone has the numbers or really knows what's going on. And I think that's a wonderful thing about it, that at its very core, this technology is democratic and it's inclusive.
Mm-hmm. And what are your thoughts on how governments are wanting to kind of either rein it in or have a little bit more control over it?
Anyone who's been in the space for a while knows that this is part and parcel. I think I've actually been quite heavily involved with regulators over the years. I was helping a lot of them, central banks, the regulators, bodies like IOSCO that are sort of coming together to understand if we need a global framework for this. It is very challenging, and it's challenging for regulators because this technology goes against their whole ethos, which is based on a jurisdiction, based on accountability of an individual person or entity, and based on the ability to enforce. So on each of those different fronts, they're challenged by this new movement. So in all fairness to the regulators, this is a difficult moment. And on top of it, a lot of people have been burned, right? I mean, those stories of people losing money, it is true, it's real. It's not a reason to stop this innovation, but I think we would all agree we want some form of regulation. Nobody wants funds from illicit actors to move around the system. That there is a balance to be made. So any of the objections by regulators is really part of it, because they're trying to keep things paused while they can just understand it. And from when I went into the space, regulators, had no idea. Fast forward today, obviously we've got all the central banks researching their own digital currency, which is crypto inspired, if you like, but regulators themselves are building out tech teams because they realize that they have to also adapt to this new technology. So it's taken them a bit longer, but everybody's getting there. And so, yes, different regulations have embraced it at different rates in different ways, which is a good thing, because as a crypto business, you've got options and you've been able to sort of hop around, keep doing your thing. And thank goodness it hasn't been a blanket ban across the board, right? So it's an opportunity for many regulators in countries that want to actually define themselves by this new technology as a way to bring in more business, promote their jurisdiction. And then you've obviously got jurisdictions that are less comfortable with it and more focused on other aspects. So it's a varied landscape. I think the journey we've been on is understandable, but the progress is undeniable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there must be a kernel of faith if it hasn't been snuffed out completely. And by which so many businesses have now been created. Yours is one of them, TokenBayCapital, which you started back in March. Tell us more about this.
Yes, so very excited about TokenBayCapital. So it came about, I used to manage traditional money, and I was in asset management at Goldman on the buy side, and then Credit Suisse, I was managing traditional wealth. And then after a period of time at PwC, where I developed, deep knowledge of crypto, an extensive network, absolute converts to everything, and the skills that I was bringing to bridging, communication between regulators, startups, investors. I was doing all of this at PwC, and many of the core skills is what a venture capital fund actually does. So it was really time for me. I like to keep moving forwards and doing new things. And I had never started my own company. I hadn't been on the entrepreneurial route. I'd probably been an intrapreneur, if you like, within corporate. But it's a very different thing to sort of branch out on your own. And for me, it was actually quite an easy decision because my skill set was there and it was apparent that this would work. It just needed hard work and application, which I have plenty of capacity for that. So I launched it, and it's up and running very fast. I've got investors, I've made deals, I'm doing what I want to do, which is helping move the technology forwards, helping to communicate with everyone about the promise of the technology. And couldn't be more grateful for this particular moment I'm in.
Was it a conscious decision to establish this company in Hong Kong? Because you say you lived in London, Singapore. So was it a conscious decision to start there?
It was, and I had mixed reviews. I felt very strongly from day one. I was actually born in Hong Kong, so for me, Hong Kong is home. And Hong Kong hasn't had great PR recently. The last few years, let alone the pandemic and recent crypto crackdown from mainland. But it's been a troubled path. But my undeniable belief in Hong Kong and the entrepreneurial spirit and the new pivot that Hong Kong's going to make as part of the Greater Bay Area, I have never doubted. And so I saw this as a fantastic opportunity to set up here because there is so much innovation going on in this part of the world. And things happen very fast. And it's a great community. Hong Kong, of course, launched their limited partnership fund structure in August of 2020. So actually, they wanted to make a concerted effort to attract venture capitalists and private equity to Hong Kong. to compete with Singapore and the tax efficient structures they have there, but also to compete with Cayman and bring that on shore so that as we have all the wealth everyone keeps talking about as part of the GBA, or the Wealth Connect, the Bond Connect, the Stock Connect, and how the GBA is becoming really the Silicon Valley of Asia, if you like, with Hong Kong as the international finance hub and springboard for that. What better place for me to position myself in the fastest growing part in the world? So definitely a conscious decision. I also get a lot of questions. I don't call myself a crypto VC fund. I call myself a digital assets and blockchain venture capital fund. That is because, it is not just about Bitcoin. And I think so many people can still not differentiate, right, between Bitcoin and this technology and how it's changing so much of our lives. And so, I haven't set myself up to invest in Bitcoin. It's investing in companies that are building the new infrastructure of the new token economy and our new social lives. And I'm an investment fund, so I can. I don't need to worry. I'm not a crypto exchange, which I think would be more challenging to be based here at this time.
Yeah, and that's an important distinction to make. I also find it fascinating that you were born in Hong Kong. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about your upbringing and your childhood and how you ended up there.
It's typical sort of colonial story. My father, my parents came out here in the early 70s, and obviously it was a British colony back then, and they had a fantastic time, and Hong Kong, runs so deep in our family because it's really the land of opportunity. It's such a community of builders. And obviously incredible. Look where Hong Kong is today. It's just extraordinary. So I guess I lived through that sort of transition, if you like. So it's always been a very special place. And education wise, I lived between Hong Kong and London. So I've got that sort of experience, I guess, the contrast between East and West.
Yes, most definitely. Fascinating childhood, and curious about what you have time for outside of work, if you have any hobbies or what you enjoy doing in your leisure time.
Gosh, I have to say weekends have disappeared since I set up my company, let alone leisure time. It's really, I think if you ask any entrepreneur, getting something off the ground is a sacrifice in many respects to everything. It takes full focus. I'm lucky that I actually enjoy it. I mean, I don't need to get away from it, but if I do take time out, it is, of course, traditional Hong Kong hiking, walking, which I find is really important to clear my mind. The pace of everything and how many things you have to think about and juggle. It's incredible just sort of immersing yourself in nature. And given we haven't been able to jump on planes for so long, I feel lucky that Hong Kong has such a beautiful wild side to it, right? It's not just the concrete jungle that you see. It's actually very green and there's a lot of things to do. So I would say that's where I dedicate the few hours that I'm not reading crypto articles.
Well, I think in some cultures they call it a forest bath or something to that effect, that it cleanses you physically and mentally. I think we all need a little bit of that in our lives. If you hadn't chosen finance as a career path, having started with your studies in history and modern history, what do you think would have been another career path that you might have entertained?
Oh, God. Well, my first job out of university, I thought I wanted to be a news presenter. So I joined ABC News. I got the graduate job there, and I was doing the night shifts on my own, reading the Reuters news wires. It was so stressful. But
as a producer?
I was like the rookie that had to run around with, literally run around everything, just doing everything.
Oh my goodness.
There was be breaking news and I'd be the one in the middle of the night on my own in the newsroom and I'd be reading the lines and they said, can you do a judgment call as to whether that bomb in Sudan is going to do we need to wake everyone up and send someone there? I was like, really? There's all responsibility lies with me. It was so stressful. Maybe I would have done something in media. I do enjoy that, but that was a very long time ago. And then, I found myself in finance completely by chance. So life takes its course.
It certainly does. It certainly does. And we always like to ask our guests, if you were to write a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Do you know, since I've set up a venture capital fund from scratch to an institutional grade level, on my own, I actually want to write a book when I have a second to help other people do exactly the same thing and really understand all the different components. So it wouldn't be about me, but I guess it would, inadvertently, it would be also about me and really, how you can just do things if you want to.
Right. Yeah. And also another thing that we like to ask our guests, successes, failures, because along the way you're bound to happen upon incredible successes, but you're also bound to get met with challenges and obstacles and have to learn to redevelop and reinvent. So I'm curious if there's any two moments in your life that would be defined as a success and one that is a failure.
Gosh, I mean, I believe all failures are valuable. I'm not very good at failing, if I'm honest. They don't spring to mind. But I think sometimes you're on the wrong path and therefore you don't succeed, which in a way is a failure because you're not reaching your full potential. And I do feel incredibly strongly about that philosophy, that all of us have incredible potential. And the only way we get there is through failing and trying and being knocked back and just really quite a lot of hard work and application. And, it just doesn't land on your lap. And if it did, then it wouldn't be a success, right? So I do feel that actually you're doing yourself an injustice if you're in something that you're not happy with, you could change. Now has never been a better time, an easier time to pivot, follow what you want to do, make sure that your work life is aligned with your core values. So I would say to anybody, don't waste time. The opportunity cost is massive when you're doing something that you don't want to do. And I think people get caught up with the perceived framework of security. But I don't think anything is ultimately that secure if you really look at it. So just do what you want to do, and there's always a way, and you'll always find that nothing's ever lost, and one thing always leads to another, even if you can't see it at that moment.
I like that. That's a very positive message. A very positive message for people who might be a little bit pessimistic about world situations, but it is within our power to make those changes. Well, before we wrap things up, I want to do a quick lightning round of questions. This is just purely for fun, and you don't have to elaborate too much. Just a few seconds on each one. I think I might know the answers to a couple of them because you are so very busy with starting your new company here. But we'll start with this one. What is the craziest thing you've ever done?
Oh my God. There was a time, it was crazy for me. I mean, everything's got to be in context, right? I'm not someone that sort of throws that much caution, but I remember I was at Goldman in London and it was a very stressful environment. I mean, you worked 18 hours, when they fired everyone as well, my hours sort of went up. But there was one afternoon where it was just kind of fine. A friend called and they were all going to New York that afternoon. They're flying from London to New York and I was sitting there at my desk. And they called me and I said, "You're going to New York? Oh my God, that's so fun for the weekend." They said, just come to the airport now. You've got however long to quickly grab a bag from home, pack a bag and just come. And I just sat there and I went, "Do you know what? I'm going to do this." It was someone else that could cover. I sort of, probably, I don't know, maybe I'll get in trouble with Goldman Sachs. Anyway, I ran home, threw stuff in a suitcase, and an hour later I was on the way to New York. That was probably the funnest thing I've ever done. It just felt so good.
And you'll never forget it.
I'll never forget it. I was terrified to go against all of my sort of goody two shoes character, but it was sometimes you just have to do that.
Yeah, it's true. And then you land in New York and it just feels electric, and you're so glad for it. All right. Now, this is a question that I think I probably know the answer to. What is the last thing that you watched on TV?
You know the answer to that? I don't even know.
So, because you're so busy, I just assume you don't have time for TV.
No, I mean, sometimes Netflix, and I don't know what I'm watching, but sometimes just the act of having it there, I do need to clear my mind before I go to sleep, because if I don't, I'm up all night thinking about everything. So that break for me is actually, I didn't do it until recently. And in order to be able to sleep well, I'm actually, I'm not good at answering things very late at night. I know some people can lie there and respond to things, but I would rather wake up at 5 a.m. and respond than do things late. So sometimes Netflix will just aimlessly be on, right? It's just
right. Anything specific on Netflix?
No.
Yeah. Okay.
Everything's addictive. I mean, everything's I don't know what any of them are, but
well, it is true. Yeah, they have a lot of series on there, and if you binge watch, that's one of the fun things I've gotten into myself. What is your favorite film and why? I'm really not a film buff. I tell you one film that made a huge impact on me. I have no idea why. It was The English Patient, and probably because I'm a massive romantic at heart. Not that I... Finds is not that to look at either.
And The English Patient was just, I don't know, I found it absolutely amazing. And the acting, and it was just an incredible movie. So that's one that sticks in my mind.
That's a good one. All right. What's something that you've wanted to check off your bucket list?
Learning Chinese.
Okay, very good. And do you have a life philosophy, something that you live by every day?
I think it's the point that I made earlier that I feel incredibly passionate about. Everybody fulfilling their own potential. People don't realize the potential that they have. They just never test it. And I think it's such a wonderful feeling to get there and show what you're made of and what you can actually achieve, what you can overcome, how strong you are, that I would encourage everybody to just push themselves if possible.
Mm-hmm. Finally, last couple of questions for you. What advice would you give to the next generation of female leaders?
Gosh, I have a lot of views on this. This is not a fast round. I mean, I would say,
and this is not a quick fire. So this is just something that we're interested in.
I do feel, I think as technology is changing the landscape and there's a paradigm shift, I think there is a paradigm shift happening in the definition of what it is to be a woman in this day and age. And I think that's a transition that many of us find really hard to navigate, no matter what side of the equation you fall on. It's we're redefining the brand of female, and I don't think we figured it out, actually. And so my biggest message, given that it's undergoing change, there are options, there are different ways to live your life. I would say to anybody or young girls, don't just follow the model that you've been given or you think you should go after. There's never been more choice. There's never been more tools available for you to create the life that you want, whatever that is. You deserve to be able to go for that, and no social pressure or norms should come in the way of that. And I'm very happy that we're moving towards an age where every woman has a choice. I had a grandmother, and I think about her a lot. She was exceptional. She was born in Beirut, French speaking, but she only cared about academia back in the day. And she got into Oxford, and it was a time when she went back, she's never been more excited. She was top of her schools, and they said, absolutely not. You're getting married, you're having babies. And it ruined her life. She never, ever ever got over that. She was not allowed to pursue secondary education and be the person that she wanted to be. And we forget that that's my grandmother wasn't able to do that. Instead, she was forced to get married, and then forced to get married to somebody where she has no economic rights. She can't even have her own wealth. So wealth that she inherited went to a husband and then took it all from her. So I think we should all look out. You don't want to be an island, but we as women are stronger than we've ever been able to be before. And I think if you want to take advantage of this new world, then you should be able to, and you should feel good about that. If you want to follow a different path, more traditional route, also fantastic. I just believe in choice and the ability to do what you want to do.
Fabulous. Lucy Gazmararian, thank you so much. So inspirational hearing from you tonight.
Thank you, Layla. It was really, really fun. Thank you very much.
So very much appreciate this. And that's going to do it for us on this episode of Blockchain All Stars. We will see you next time.